Let's talk about the root cause, why it's so hard to make any sort of really big change in your life. If you've been trying to make some changes that will level up your life in some way, but it feels like no matter what you're trying, that it's not really working out the way that you want it to, or that it feels like you've got some like big amount of untapped potential that feels like it should be really close. You should just be able to like grab it, but it still feels kind of far away. Most often, the culprit of that is doing something called shadow work. And if you're new to that term, this is going to be a great place for you because I'm going to walk you through exactly what it is. And I'm going to give you just the first couple of steps that you can use to start doing your own shadow work. Now, this is super duper important. At least I've found it to be really important in my own life. And I didn't even really know that I was doing shadow work or even what that term meant. But it turns out this is something that I've been doing for a really long time. And it's what's allowed me to build the life that I currently have, which is pretty on point with the one that I set up when I was thinking about what does, my best life look like. That's what I've built. And the foundation of that is really about shadow work. So I am going to walk you through just a couple of things that are going to help you get started with this whole thing. Because if you're like me and you're trying to make changes, or like I was, you start adding all these different skills on top of whatever you're doing. It's like we want to stack skill after skill after skill, or new mindsets or new learnings or whatever it is, because we think that there's something missing from where we are right now, if that point is here, up to where we want to go. We think that there's something missing in that, and we think that skills is what's going to get us there. Like we have to get stronger or something like that. What shadow work is about is it's still going from here to here, but instead of getting stronger in order to do it, it's really just becoming lighter and making it easier. It's kind of like having less gravity. If you were trying to go, 10 miles on the moon, that'd be a lot easier than trying to go 10 miles on the earth because there's less gravity on the moon. Shadow work allows you to kind of take some of that gravity off. Now, a lot of times people will look at shadow work and they'll have this vision in their head that it's got to be something scary, which I get, right? Shadows, they show up usually in like a dark setting and you're not sure exactly what it is. Like I'm picturing a movie shadow. And so, yeah, of course, that does sound scary, but shadow work, it's not really the right definition for this type of work that allows you to release some of this gravitational force that's really pulling you back from where you want to go. A better way to look at it is kind of everything you buried as a kid that you needed to do, you felt you needed to do in that moment to feel two things, which are really the only things that we want to feel as a kid. And then we want to feel these later as adults too. We want to feel loved and we want to feel safe. Those are really the only two things that we truly want as part of the human experience. But we have to take these actions when we're children that bury some of the things that we like doing, that make it so we can feel like we're accepted, like we're loved, like we're safe. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that as we get going. But before we do, when we talk about change, we usually ask the wrong question first. The question that we ask first when we're not achieving something or making some change that we want, and achievement isn't really the right word for that because any sort of change, like we look at relationships and you're not achieving a better relationship. Like that's just something that is a change if your relationship currently isn't what you want it to be. So picture that as what this is. Achievement and change, they're roughly the same thing for purposes of this conversation. So we start out with the wrong question, which is usually like, what's wrong with me? In other words, why don't I have this cool thing in my life or this cool feeling in my life right now? There must be something wrong with me. And that's something that I did myself. And I would think that what was wrong with me was that I was missing the next skill, or I was missing the next mindset, or whatever it was always something missing because I was asking the question, what's wrong with me? But then I started realizing that I was asking the wrong question. And this is honestly when I started doing shadow work without even really having the term shadow work to go with it. And all it was I just started asking myself a different question. It's, what did I have to hide in order to be accepted? Not what's wrong with me. It's, what did I have to hide in order to be accepted? Now, there's a big difference in that, at least mentally for me, because when I think what's wrong with me, that kind of sounds like I'm getting into a fight, right? There's some fundamental aspect of me that isn't good enough, or isn't smart enough, or isn't handsome enough, or funny enough, or pick whatever enough you want. And it's like you have to go like kind of attack that versus what is it that I had to hide in order to feel accepted? Like, that's just a discovery question. And so it opened me up a lot more to figuring out what it was that was ultimately my limiting factor. And if you ask yourself the same question, my bet is you're probably going to start pulling at the threads of what your limiting factor is too. Because if we think about things that we had to bury, those being something that is going on with us right now. So let me give you an example of this. Let's say that you have somebody that is really shy as an adult. They're not outgoing, they don't really raise their hands at work in team meetings, or if you were at a party with them, they really don't know what to say, not because they're not nice, but just because they don't know how to deal with that, and they're really shy and really reserved. Well, what they might have had to bury when they were a kid, just for an example, is let's say they would walk around their house singing, and that was something that they loved to do, but it bothered the other people in their house, siblings, parents, like it bothered them. And they were told, you got to stop doing that. What's going to happen to that? They're going to need to feel loved. They're going to need to feel safe. And just as a spoiler alert, you have to feel loved in order to feel safe, because that child who was told not to sing, they need to be loved in order to stay in the house, and to stay in the house is what makes them feel safe. So both of those things go hand in hand. But if that child was told you can't sing in the house anymore, guess what? They're going to start to feel like they've got to bury that expression of themselves. And that's really all singing is. It's like this expression of like what you're feeling inside. And when they get older, they get shy because they had to bury that expression of themselves, and they haven't figured out how to put it back out there. So picture this as kind of step one. It's just the change of that one little question, which is, what's wrong with me? We get rid of that question and we start looking at, what did I have to bury in order to do it? Now, a lot of times it can be difficult to figure out what that is because it was a long time ago, like childhood memories, especially these kind that produce personality traits later in our lives. Those aren't the ones that are the most memorable necessarily. So we could talk about this and you could think about it, but it wouldn't necessarily pop like right back into your brain. So you might have a tough time figuring out what it is, which is where step two is helpful. If you ask the questions and they don't come up, one of the things that I've found to be useful is I call it the mirror. So I look for things in other people that just drive me nuts. Some personality trait of them that drives me nuts. For example, maybe there's a guy who doesn't like other people who are really arrogant and he gets triggered by those people. Or maybe it's a woman that doesn't like somebody that's really, really needy and she gets triggered by that. I have the same type of thing where if I look at something and there's a personality trait that just drives me crazy, then I will look at that as a mirror. And this is the part that most people hate because it's really about honesty with yourself. More often than not, the things that drive you crazy with somebody else, those point to the exact shadow work you need to do, the things that you need to release, the beliefs that you ended up kind of like burying, or the parts of yourself that you ended up kind of burying. those show up in other people. Don't ask me how it happens, but it happens with near 100% accuracy in every person's life that I have ever worked with or just been friends with, and myself too. The aspects of other people that drive you crazy are the things you need to work on. So you can look at those things and maybe those prompt a question, which is like, hey, help me understand in my mind, and this can be done in a meditation, which is the best place to find the answers to this stuff, or at least to spark the memories, is try to go back and have your mind show you why arrogance is something that really, really triggers you, or why neediness is something that really, really triggers you. And you'll find something in there, and it's just going to be a thread. So you just got to pull at the thread. You're not going to get the answer like all at once. And that's actually why most people that start out thinking shadow work is something they want to start doing, they end up quitting because they go in to think they're going to slay the dragon, and then they end up feeling worse and they just bail on the entire process. That's not really how it works, because I want you to picture all of this energy and all of these emotions that you had to bury at some point in your life to feel those two things, right? Safe and loved. Then I want you to think of those more just like a river. And you don't really stop a river by damming it. You might just divert it, right? But in reality, what you've got to do is you've got to stop fighting the river. The river is going to flow. That means that you're not trying to slay the dragon of these emotions. You're not trying to get rid of these emotions. You've just got to sit with those emotions and realize that they're there and they were totally valid, and they probably are still valid. And sitting with those things is going to be the thing that releases the gravity, like we talked about earlier, because the simple recognition and bringing those things to light, it shows you how to carry them better. Remember, it's not about getting rid of it at all. You're not going to dam that river, and nobody ever is. What's going to happen is you're just going to learn how to work with it a little bit better than you are right now. So those are your first two steps, right? First is the wrong question. We've got to take away this question that makes it feel like something's wrong with you, and then replace it with what's the thing you really had to bury. And then the second is looking at the mirror if you can't get an answer based off of the first question. If you just do those two things, it's going to set you off and start you on the right path when it comes to addressing your own shadows. One thing I'll leave you with on this, though, is to realize that shadow work, it's not self-improvement. It might get lumped in with all the other self-improvement things. What shadow work is it's really self-honesty, which is a totally different thing. But from a place of honesty, that's where you can ultimately make these changes that you want to. Picture it like building a house. The foundation's got to be solid. The foundation of you and the honesty of you and why you have these things from your past and how you can work with those things from your past, that's the right foundation. All right, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you got value out of this video. Share the video with somebody if you got value out of this video, but only do those things if you actually got value out of those things. That's it for this video. I'll see you guys on the next one.